Yeah, I think we were just kind of slow. And every time that we're slow, especially defensively, it just somehow affects our offense. And so, to be frank, I don't think anyone else around the league thinks that we can do it anymore. But I think that our group does.
There were some thoughts. I think that it matched up defensively more than anything with the way that we were going to try to play them, or in some of our switches and things like that. So that was mostly the reason.
How do you blow a 13-point lead to one of the worst teams in the league with your playoff hopes on the line? That's not just a loss, that's an embarrassment. Indiana didn't just slip up, they collapsed on the biggest stage of the season. And now the question every fan is screaming: was this meltdown on the players, or did the coaching staff completely fumble the bag? Indiana had everything right where they wanted it. A double-digit cushion, momentum in their hands, the crowd buzzing like the Fever were finally about to handle business. Up 13 against a Washington team that's been stuck in the basement all season, this was supposed to be the night the Fever flexed their playoff muscles. Instead, it turned into one of the ugliest collapses of the year. Because in just a few brutal minutes, that 13-point lead turned into rubble. Washington didn't just chip away, they detonated it with a 22-7 run. That's not a slow burn, that's a full-on house fire, and Indiana was the one handing out the gasoline. Possession after possession, the Fever looked rattled, careless, like they didn't even know what the scoreboard said. And let's be real, this wasn't Washington suddenly morphing into the '96 Bulls. Nah, this was Indiana walking out of their own front door, leaving it unlocked, and practically inviting the Mystics to come inside and steal the game. No clamps on defense, no composure on offense, just mistake after mistake after mistake. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You saw it coming, you screamed at the screen, but they never hit the brakes. The speed of the collapse made it even worse. 1 minute, Indiana's up comfortably, looking like they're ready to cruise to a much-needed win. 2 turnovers later, a couple of reckless shots, and suddenly the Mystics are alive. It snowballed so fast that by the time the Fever realized what was happening, the roof had already caved in. And the worst part? Every bit of it was preventable. This wasn't some unstoppable star dropping 40 on their heads. This wasn't a masterclass of execution from Washington. This was Indiana losing track of the basics, securing rebounds, making smart passes, controlling the tempo. They didn't get beat. They self-destructed. When you're fighting for your playoff life, that kind of collapse isn't just a bad night. It's unforgivable. Because what does it say about a team that can't protect a 13-point lead against a bottom feeder? It says they don't know how to finish. It says the moment is bigger than them. And if that's the case, then maybe they're not ready for the postseason smoke at all. Indiana didn't just lose this game, they gift-wrapped it. Every single time the Fever built momentum, they found a way to shoot themselves in the foot. We're talking turnovers at the worst possible moments, lazy fouls bailing out Washington, and defensive breakdowns that looked like a summer league scrimmage. You can't expect to survive in a playoff race when you're basically running a charity drive for your opponent's points. The free throw disparity alone tells you everything you need to know. Washington stepped to the line 26 times. 26! That's not aggression. That's Indiana being careless, reaching, and getting caught out of position. When you foul a mediocre team into rhythm, you turn them into killers. The Fever didn't just give the Mystics opportunities, they begged them to stay in the game. And then the giveaways. Sloppy passes, dribbles off the foot, careless handles under pressure. Those turnovers weren't just random mistakes. They were fuel for Washington's run. Every live ball turnover turned into an easy basket the other way. What should have been a knockout punch turned into Indiana punching themselves in the face. Defensively, it was even worse. Simple rotations broke down. Closeouts were half-hearted. Guards were getting beat off the dribble like it was a layup line. Washington didn't need to run anything fancy. Indiana's defense was practically saying, "Come on in, the paint's open." That's not playoff caliber basketball. That's pickup game sloppiness. The cruel part? None of this was inevitable. These weren't Mystics outsmarting them with next-level schemes. It was the Fever unraveling with unforced errors. Washington didn't suddenly turn into the '96 Bulls. They just sat back, watched Indiana implode, and happily took the free gifts. And that's where the sting really sets in. Because the mistakes hurt. But what made them fatal was who capitalized. It wasn't some random bench player getting hot. It was Washington stars smelling blood and tearing Indiana apart. And when the game was on the line, there was one player who made Indiana pay for every mistake, and she turned this collapse into a statement. Aliyah Boston showed up. Don't let the box score fool you. 20 points and 9 boards is not just production. That's leadership in a game where everything was falling apart. She was working inside, taking contact, demanding the ball, and doing what a franchise cornerstone is supposed to do. You can't look at her effort and say she was part of the collapse. If anything, she was dragging Indiana along while the team unraveled around her. Kelsey Mitchell? Same deal. She poured in 14 points and dished out 9 assists. That's not just scoring, that's playmaking. That's trying to get everyone else involved. That's veteran presence. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't passing up shots. She was trying to steady the offense. You look at her stat line, and you don't see a player who folded. You see someone desperately trying to stop the bleeding. Then you've got Sophie Cunningham. Pure hustle. 4 steals in a game like this is energy you can't fake. She was in passing lanes, forcing mistakes, doing the dirty work that never shows up on highlight reels, but absolutely shifts games. That's the kind of grind you need when you're protecting a lead. That's the kind of grind that should have iced the game. Even Ari Sims, a hardship signee, not even supposed to be a key piece, came in and gave them spark minutes. She wasn't scared of the moment. She wasn't playing like someone on borrowed time. She contributed. She hustled. That says a lot about the effort level across the roster. This wasn't a team sulking. This wasn't a team giving up. The players showed fight. So when you add it all up, Boston's dominance, Mitchell's leadership, Cunningham's hustle, Sims' spark, the Fever had more than enough effort on the floor. They had the juice. They had the intensity. This wasn't about desire. This wasn't about the players not caring. And that's where it gets ugly. Because if the roster brought that much energy and still found a way to blow a 13-point lead to one of the weakest teams in the league, then you can't just look at the box score. You've got to look at the bench. You've got to look at the system. You've got to look at the coaching staff. And that's the real sting of this loss. Not that the Fever didn't try, but that the effort wasn't enough. Because the people making the decisions on the sideline had no answers. And here's where it gets flat out embarrassing. Because it wasn't Elena Delle Donne coming back from retirement. It wasn't some MVP-level superstar suddenly cooking Indiana's defense. Nope, it was rookies. Rookies who looked like they were running the show in crunch time. Hannah Citron, a first-year player, walked into that fourth quarter like she owned the gym. Every time Indiana's defense sagged, she made them pay. Kiki Rice, another rookie, attacked the paint with zero fear, drawing fouls and living at the free throw line. You're supposed to make rookies look like rookies. Instead, Indiana made them look like seasoned veterans running a clinic on how to close out a game. That's the humiliation here. It's one thing if a future Hall of Famer torches you when the season is on the line. That happens. Legends rise in the moment. But getting diced up by a couple of rookies on a team that's been bottom feeding all year, that's not a bad break. That's a full-on indictment of your defense, your poise, and your leadership. And don't get it twisted. This wasn't Washington suddenly transforming into the '96 Bulls. This was Indiana handing them the steering wheel and saying, "Here, go ahead, drive this comeback home." The Fever had the veterans, the all-stars, the playoff motivation. And yet, the rookies were the ones dictating pace, energy, and execution. Even worse, nobody on Indiana stepped up to put a stop to it. No veteran huddle, no hard foul to set a tone, no coach's adjustment to shake things up. Just silence, hesitation, and wide eyes as Washington's rookies took over the biggest minutes of the night. That's not just a failure of talent, that's a failure of leadership, plain and simple. Because if you can't steady the ship against rookies, how in the world are you supposed to handle playoff pressure when the lights are 10 times brighter and the stars are 10 times better? And here's where we get to the heart of the storm, the coaching. Let's be clear, the Fever didn't just lose this game because of missed shots or hustle plays. They lost it because of decisions, or really indecisions from the sidelines. The rotations, the adjustments, the lack of accountability, it all came crashing down. and the spotlight is now squarely on Coach Christie's sides. Take Chloe Biby, for example. The rookie sharpshooter has been sitting there all season, proving she can stretch the floor, hitting over 42% from three, one of the best marks on the team. And yet, a DNP-CD did not play. Not because of injury, not because of foul trouble, just benched. Meanwhile, the Fever desperately needed spacing, desperately needed someone who could punish Washington for packing the paint, and Biby never saw a second of action. Fans were furious, and honestly, rightfully so. Now, Coach Sides gave her explanation after the game, saying it was about defensive matchups and the flow of the game. But let's keep it real. Defense? The Fever gave up 22 in the fourth to a team that ranks near the bottom of the league in scoring. If defense was the reason, then explain why the Fever still got burned on rotations, still left shooters wide open, still let Washington's rookies slice them apart like veterans. The defense excuse doesn't hold water when the defense flat out collapsed anyway. And this is what makes fans feel like they're being gaslit. On one hand, the coaching staff is saying it's about defensive schemes, but on the other hand, the eye test is screaming something else. Indiana got lost on switches. They doubled when they didn't need to. They sagged off shooters at the worst possible times. It wasn't just a defensive breakdown, it was a defensive identity crisis. And when you've got weapons sitting on the bench who could at least help balance the floor offensively, fans start asking, what's the plan here? The anger wasn't just about Biby either. Rotations all night felt random. Players who had rhythm got yanked. Lineups with no ball handler were thrown out in key moments. It felt less like a strategy and more like a roulette wheel, spinning lineups until something stuck. Spoiler, nothing stuck. And every minute that ticked away, Washington grew more confident, while Indiana looked more confused. At the end of the day, this wasn't a case of a roster that didn't care. We already saw Boston, Mitchell, Cunningham, Sims, all putting in real effort. This was a case of the coaching staff failing to maximize that effort, failing to protect a lead, failing to read the room. And that's what makes this loss sting the most. It wasn't about heart, it was about direction. Or more accurately, the lack of it. When the dust settled, the most telling part of this loss didn't come from the box score. It came from the microphones after the game. On one side, you had Christy Wallace and Grace Berger giving the usual professional answers. But then came Lexi Cunningham, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. She flat out said, "We gotta get back to being dogs." Translation? Enough of the excuses, enough of the soft stretches, enough of the collapses. She called for fire, grit, and accountability. That's a player demanding a mentality shift. Now contrast that with what head coach Christy Sides offered post-game. Instead of talking about toughness or urgency, she fell back on the same explanations fans are tired of hearing. We got stuck on offense. Fouls hurt us. Injuries are piling up. Yes, those things are true, but notice what's missing. Ownership. There was no, "we got outcoached." No, "I should have adjusted sooner." It was deflection, and fans can smell it from a mile away. And that's where the disconnect is starting to grow. The players are calling for accountability and grit. They're saying we need to be tougher, we need to bring energy, we need to stop folding. Meanwhile, the coach is giving press conference sound bites that sound like damage control rather than leadership. To the fan base, it feels like the players are living in reality, and the coach is stuck in excuses. This isn't just about X's and O's, it's about trust. When players are busting their lungs on the court and then have to sit through rotations that make no sense or defensive schemes that keep leaving rookies wide open, frustration builds. And when those same players step up to the mic asking for fight, but their coach points to fouls and injuries, that gap grows even wider. And here's the scary part. If that gap keeps growing, it won't just cost Indiana games. It could cost them the locker room. It could fracture the trust between effort and strategy. And if that happens, the Fever's season could collapse before Caitlin Clark even steps back on the floor. And here's where everything comes to a head. The question hanging over Indiana like a storm cloud. Is Stephanie White the right coach to guide this team into the playoffs? Because yes, the Fever have battled injuries. Yes, Caitlin Clark's absence changes the entire offensive flow. Yes, the roster has been patched together with hardship contracts. But let's be real. every team in the WNBA deals with adversity. The difference between contenders and pretenders isn't just talent, it's leadership. And right now, the Fever's leadership is under the microscope. Some fans argue this was just bad luck. A few calls didn't go their way. A couple of players hit unexpected shots, and suddenly the game slipped. But others see a much darker pattern. A team with enough effort, enough talent, but not enough direction. When players like Boston and Mitchell are putting up strong numbers, when bench pieces like Sims are giving you instant energy, and when Cunningham is literally telling the world we need to be dogs again, it's hard not to wonder, is the problem coming from the sideline? And this isn't just about one loss to the Mystics. This is about trajectory. Indiana is supposed to be building a playoff culture, a foundation for Clark, Boston, and Mitchell to grow into something dangerous. But what message does it send if the team collapses in crunch time, can't protect leads, and looks confused when the pressure mounts? If you can't figure that out now, how will you handle postseason intensity later? That's why this debate matters. If White can't adapt, if she keeps riding questionable rotations, ignoring hot shooters like Biby, and leaning on excuses instead of adjustments, then this team isn't just at risk of missing the playoffs. They're at risk of wasting the momentum they've built all season. Because let's be brutally honest, if the Fever don't fix this, the playoffs aren't slipping away. They're already gone.